So, we've just heard your piece, Summer, which is a recorder concerto, and it's one of the 4 seasons in one day concertos that I've commissioned covering summer, autumn, winter, and spring from different composers with different instruments. So let's start with the instrument you chose, the recorder, Nick. Why did you choose the recorder?
Yeah, great question. Before we get there, thank you so much for asking me to write this piece. You know, today's been fantastic with the Glasgow Barons and László. We've had such a brilliant day, and it's been so exciting to be working with you. The recorder, I think, is one of these instruments that we often don't see in the orchestral repertoire really at all. Mm-hmm. And when we talked initially about the project, we talked about the kind of reflections on the Vivaldi 4 seasons. So I was trying to play a little bit with the choice of instrument on that Barockian kind of world that Vivaldi might have been aware of, bring it into a contemporary kind of environment and context alongside that. So that's where the idea of recorder really came from.
Okay, but when you worked with László Rózsa on his recorder, and he is an expert recorder player who can play all manner of repertoire, and he brought in a particular instrument for your concerto, what kind of things did you have to talk about in order for you to understand how to write for him?
Yeah, incredibly fundamental from the very beginning, really. I mean, recorders, as far as I was aware, was the little plastic thing you got in primary school, and we all learned how to play, you know, Twinkle Twinkle Little Star on. Recorders are far broader and wider spectrum of stuff than that. So we started at the very beginning. László sent me whole hosts of information about kind of sound, tonal qualities, timbral things, orchestrations, chamber music that he's played, things that I should listen to, everything from Andriessen to Telemann. So really the whole range and spectrum of composers and eras. Started there, really spent a few weeks, if not a couple of months, really getting underneath the instrument, listening to lots of stuff, annoying everyone around me as well by playing it through speakers, and really kind of getting underneath the skin with László.
Okay, so you've created 3 movements. The first movement is called Birds, the second movement is called Grey, which relates to the Scottish summer, of course, and the third movement is called Peak. Before we get into why those 3 movements are the way they are, perhaps you can just tell us a little bit about the story behind why you called them those 3 things.
Yeah, so summer, I think, is one of these things where we normally expect that joyful exuberance, and that is something that we all do love about summer, or at least most of us love. And I absolutely love a warm, sunny day, but there's also so much more going on around our lives in summer. You know, when I think of summer, I think of going up and down shopping streets, going shopping, and one of the things that I noticed, for example, is whenever I kind of seem to walk down Sauchiehall Street or other busy roads, we get attacked by birds. And that's something that for me is quintessentially Glaswegian summer. Mm-hmm. Grey, as you mentioned, this kind of idea of the greyness. We've got in Glasgow incredibly long nights in the winter, but incredibly short nights that almost don't go black, that kind of greyness of the Glasgow night in summer. And then peak, this idea of everyone trying to get out of Glasgow and explore the Trossachs and beyond, the West Coast beaches, and everything in between. So trying to really find that kind of exuberance of the Scottish kind of idea of summer and kind of exploring around Glasgow too.
Okay, so it's a standard 3-movement concerto, as a Vivaldi concerto would be, as many concertos are. So was there any particular influence in your mind from the basic model that Vivaldi would have used in the 18th century?
Well, I suppose in some ways, yeah, we've got a fast, kind of moderately fast first movement, a slow middle movement, and a fast final movement, very much of that kind of ilk. I think László and I were quite keen, really, when we were talking about the recorder, the things that it does well, and you know, the things that we can explore, and each of those movements explores a different one of those things. So the kind of fast nature of trills and kind of ornaments that are very key to Baroque repertoire, all in the first movement, kind of long melodic lines in the second movement, and in the third movement, this kind of fast, articulate stuff. And I think stuff's that key word, isn't it? You know, concerti and soloists are throwing both the notes that we have as composers, that's what we can influence, but bringing other stuff into it, that exuberance that László can bring to it as well.
Okay, and that last movement in particular, some people might, when they hear it, perceive as something to do with minimalism, but it isn't really, is it?
Not minimalism per se, I suppose. I think to give one of the composer tricks away, I suppose, for me it's about this structural thing. It's called peak. You know, we've got at the very beginning this kind of ascending stuff, this kind of building and building, this luscious moment in the middle that's the looking out across the top of that kind of moment of peak, and then the descending back to where we started. So if you think about that third movement rather more as a shape, and we think about it as a peak, maybe Ben Lomond or some other mountain.
Mm-hmm. And the first movement is about the birds in Sauchiehall Street. There are very many different characters of bird in this particular movement. Some of them very sweet, some of them quite banal, some of them quite seriously after your Greg's sausage roll. So what was your objective in that first movement in trying to paint a picture of all of these different aspects?
I think it's a bit of fun.
All right.
It's a bit of finding something. It's not the Messiaen approach of sitting down with my bird song, writing them all out, charting different birds, saying this is what the raven sounds like, this is what the sparrow sounds like. It's just about finding those things that we can all connect with. We all know what a bird's like when it starts charging at your sausage roll from Greg's.
Yes.
We all kind of have that kind of reaction and that kind of emotional reaction sometimes too. So just playing around with those kind of ideas.
Okay, so what do you think will be next for this recorder concerto and for the recorder concerto as a concept?
Well, I really hope recorder concertos more generally actually become a bit more mainstream. Writing for recorders has been something that I didn't think I'd be doing, but has been really, really fun.
Yeah.
I think recorder is one of these kind of gateway instruments that we see in primary schools. Loads of people know what the recorder is and know kind of roughly what it sounds like. So the more that we can write for those sorts of instruments, the more that we're able to expand who listens to stuff too. In this concerto itself, László and I were talking, perhaps a percussion and recorder version, or a piano and recorder version as well. How can we create this kind of sense of community that could be sent out, given to other recorder players and played elsewhere?
That's a fantastic thought. And on that, I'll end it. Thank you very much, Nick.
Thanks so much, Paul.